what you can do with it, why when we look back some years from now, we'll see that this really was the beginning of a new area in brand marketing. So hope you find it valuable. And, you know, it's not simple. The domain space is a strange space, but make no mistake, the domain and IP infrastructure is universal and it is worldwide. So I really believe that the more you as a brand understand what it means to own a registry, the more you're going to realize how these new capabilities that come with a registry and the technologies that develop will really change how everybody markets, and particularly brands. So let's dig in. So just a sec. Just trying to advance my slide. There we go. So contents. First of all, we're going to talk about the implications, you know, what it means for brands. You know, obviously I'm really bullish on this. It is hard to get your head around. When I started thinking about this about a year and a half, when I saw the brands come out and apply for that, I started to really try to think, okay, what does this mean? So I've done a lot of thinking about this and want to share that with you. I'll give you a little bit of a background on me. We'll talk about the brand story, you know, why you applied and what made that decision, and, you know, where we're going to go through 2020. Why I believe, and many in the industry believe, that, you know, every brand, every major brand and aspiring brand will own a .brand registry as we roll forward. And how you know, and then we'll get into some use cases. We'll just touch on a few of those to try to think about it. Then we're going to talk about, you know, a concept that I call .brand IQ. You know, what is it? You know, what's your organizational .brand IQ? And then from that, we'll try to turn it from ideation into go-to-market, give you a sense of what Authentic Web is bringing to the table, and then a few recommendations and a Q&A. So the first thing is around the change, the taxonomy change of the internet. Now, I think of taxonomy as an order. So we've got a new order coming to the integrate, where we have, you know, copious amounts of content that are getting developed all the time, and this content is going to migrate to areas of interests, whether it's on verticals or brands, and it's exploding the amount of content. So the taxonomy with the new TLDs going into the thousands on niches, it's going to help all of us understand and where we can find content, we can make sense of it, how we consume it, and how we value it. So, you know, people have said to me, so why is this different? You know, we've had expansion before in the domain space, so what makes this so different? One of the big differences is just the scale. The massive scale of hundreds or, you know, approaching thousands of new TLDs that are coming to the market. And we're also getting TLDs that mean something, you know, whether it's .club on the area interest of .club, or if it's brands on something that's specific to .brands. Secondly, because you can own the space as a .brand, it's going to change how you can market, how you can engage and deliver services through your partners and channels, because there are new capabilities in a registry. Some are not obvious, and many of them are unknown. And, you know, no one, including me or anyone in this space, really understands or knows what's going to happen. But what we do know is that there are new capabilities, and new capabilities always drive innovation. So when you think about capabilities, you know, what are those? So the first and most obvious is, you know, just the fact that it is .brand. It's pure, it's clean, it's authentic, it's trusted, it's secure. You know, you control it, you have security over it, ownership and authenticity around what your brand is. You know, these are not small changes on the web. You know, when you think about owning a space, every investment you make in your .brand is an investment that you make that has residual value over the long term. So you're investing in your own space versus a, you know, a third-party technology or platform that may change without you in mind. So that's important. Gaining the data as sort of as visibility to understand, you know, what people are doing on an ecosystem that you might create on your .brand. That's quite significant, that you can understand who's interacting with who, and we'll get into some of those discussions. The other thing that I think is interesting is sort of the direct intuitive navigation. You know, when you think about the market out there, and someone out on the internet thinking, well, I want to look at a product and I know the brand. So let's say Prius.Toyota. Maybe I'll just type in Prius.Toyota and see what I get, or product.target, or chair.ikea, or location.brand. I think we're going to start seeing people, once they understand what the dot brand exists and what it represents and the ability for them to find products and services, that we'll see people quickly adjust their behaviors to this intuitive notion. Also, when you think about engagement and service innovations, that you can deploy IP-based services on a dot brand. You just think about, interesting ideas such as auto VIN number. So VIN.brand if you're a car company, and you can come off the line and create VIN.brand and map that to a name, Peter LaMantia.BMW, and now you can deliver services to that destination, which is that automobile. Those are some really interesting concepts. And then, and related to that as well is the Internet of Everything. And, if you like John Chambers' phrase, he's coined that one. Other people call it the Internet of Things. When you think about products and services and giving them a presence online and securing that tunnel with them with technologies like DNSSEC and others. There's just some very interesting new capabilities that are going to be available to brands to create ecosystems and communities. So those are some of the capabilities. So you're probably wondering, who I am, and why I've started this company, and I'll give you a bit of a background there. So I've been involved in the domain space since the late 1990s, largely domain and web services. We built a product here, a web services business called Easy Hosting in Canada. We attained the #1 position in the late 1990s and into early 2000s. I've been a management consultant for 10 years, helping CEOs develop and launch different web services. Worked with a company, Hostopia.com, for years. Hostopia is a private label web service provider serving telcos, so we provided a platform to those telcos. It was acquired by Deluxe Corporation. They're a Fortune 1000 check and form printing company, and they wanted to change their business and create web services and online marketing services for all their customers. When they acquired us, they acquired aplus.net, and I became the president of that company, where we delivered web service and online marketing. And then in 2011, I left there and got involved in the top-level domain space. And I wrote the application and the business plan for .club. .club is now ready to go out to market. So from that experience, I really gained a better understanding of ICANN and the process and the new GTLD expansion program. And I became just completely engaged in by what this is really going to mean. And then in 2012, I founded Authentic Web. So I've been in this space for a long time. I've managed domains. I know how painful they are, but I also recognize, what some of those opportunities are. So I also recognize that brands really didn't understand, what this was. What's it mean to own a registry? So I thought I'd take you through a brand story. So you'll probably see yourself in this and think about, where you are in it. So in 2011, brands made this decision. They applied. So they applied, many of them, in my belief, for defensive reasons. They didn't really know what it meant, but they also understood that, it's not a huge cost, but, not insignificant, but it's certainly the cost was worth it to protect their brand. They spent, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to build. They're not going to let that go away just by simply missing it. So they applied. And then 2012, we got, the big reveal. We found out that, no, there aren't 500 applications as most people expected. There's 1,930 of them, and 619 of those were brands. So that's where I really started to look at this and think about, okay, what can brands do? Why does this matter to brands? Last year, we're going through the process. It's difficult. It's arduous. A lot of uncertainty around timing. But most of that's now passed, and as we enter 2014, we're really around, okay, so what's the strategy? How are we going to execute this thing, or what are we going to do with it? So through 14 and 15, We're going to see different brands start to deploy strategies, and we're talking to a lot of different brands about their ideas and how they want to get this stuff out to market. And from 14 to 20, we're going to have another round or two, and then when we look back at 2020, we're going to see who the winners and losers are. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and what are the dynamics of an organization and the execution that they put forward to make them winners and losers. So the first step, let's just look at this and say, okay, why .brand? Why do I want to do this? Why will brands adopt a registry strategy? So it's really a fallback to say, all right, defensively, we defend and we have a domain strategy and cost to defend against our marks. And we do that today. We do in the 22 generics and selective country codes. So as we go forward in this, you're going to see that change, and some of those challenges related to defense and a broader expansion is a huge problem for brands. So we'll talk about a little why that's a driver. And then we'll look at the positive side, the opportunity side, to build use cases to support business objectives. So first, on the defensive side, everybody on this call, if you're a brand, you're looking at this, say, okay, you're constantly having to defend yourself. They're phishing, fraud, piracy, whether or not those nefarious actors are successful or not, it still creates brand damage. It still creates trust issues out in the market, whether or not a site that someone goes to is really that brand site. So, and the challenge for brands is this is a big cost and there's no ROI. So it's a big, big problem, and that's today. So that's today where you have 22 generics and a number of country codes. So let's look at sort of how this looks in an expanded world. So bear with me as we walk through a scenario here. So let's say brand X, they want to deploy a broad defensive strategy. And these numbers, if you look at the top red line, you've got a cost going out down the road, and you've got along the x-axis we have the number of GTLDs that are available. And I've just excluded country codes for simplicity. But let's say you have 350 left of the dot terms. You defend against the 22 generics today. Let's say the average cost of one of those domain names is $30. So today, if you're doing a broad defensive strategy, that's going to cost your organization $231,000. Not insignificant, but for a big organization, it certainly is worth it to protect your brand out in the market. So if you go forward and deployed a broad defensive strategy on all 700 new opens, that's going to be 245,000 domain names, or $7 million. It just doesn't make sense to do that. There's no ROI benefit on that, and it's just to defend. Let's say you say, okay, let's get a little bit wiser here. We're not gonna be broad on every single new TLD that comes out in the market. So let's say we just do 33% coverage on those. It's still going to cost you $2.4 million. So you can toggle that back and say, okay, we're only going to do 10%, but we still need to protect our marks. It's still a very significant cost to the organization, and it's not going to be effective because you're going to have nefarious actors finding other TLDs to infringe upon your brand. And as you roll that out logically over the next several years, as we have more rounds and more TLDs, this is a massive cost to an organization that's just not sustainable and is not effective. So this is why most brands, when they think about the expansion in the program, have a very bad taste in their mouth, because this is a negative to the organization. So what's the solution here? My belief the solution is to anchor on your .brand. Make the market know that if it's not .brand, it's not necessarily you, especially in luxury goods like Richemont brands or Gucci, or some of the other brands that have a big challenge in defending themselves online. So anchor on your .brand. Continue to defend selectively on your pure and closed marks. No question you're going to need to do that. You're going to need the support of some of the good providers in the space to do that. But the solution around .brand is really an opportunity that, if you approach it the right way, is an opportunity to gain back control of that. So that's the defensive side, and a driver why I believe that brands will adopt a registry as we go forward. On the positive side, and this is where it gets really interesting when we start thinking about the different use cases, and it's a huge opportunity to innovate in a proprietary space. So if you think about, you've probably seen some of these use cases bandied about before. If you think about customer.brand, what's the problem there? Well, we're trying to build better relationships with our customers. Why do we want to do that? Because we want to gain affinity with them. Affinity is a motive. It's how I feel about a brand. But I also want advocacy. I want those people, those customers of mine, to advocate for my brand because they've experienced a customer-centric experience that is unique to them and drives more value to them. Customer.brand is a very interesting one. I think it's probably only viable with some brands, but it's very interesting. One of the low-hanging fruits here, in my view, is channel. When you think of channel, if you're a big brand with lots of channel operators and points of presence, your problem with channel is oversight, insights, and understanding the performance of your channel operators. Like most businesses, 20% or even less of those channel operators deliver 80% of the business. So how can we look at that whole channel and improve the performance of that channel? So with a .brand, you can now deploy consistent content with channel.brand and cascade content out to those entities. You can gain control, you can gain visibility, and it's going to allow that brand to look at their entire channel of several hundred or thousand of points of presence and measure which of those in the channel are delivering the best results, why they're delivering the best results, and then take those best practices and deploy those across the entire channel to lift the channel. On the Marcom side, this is, once the marketers really understand what they've got here, and they can put response destinations that are marketing communications or key message.brand online, it's going to improve that response ROI. And it's going to improve the branding because it's, key message.brand, simple, elegant, memorable. You can improve people's thinking. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And service.brand is, it's as varied as brands are varied. What do we want to do there? We want people to discover our services, and then we want to be able to deliver those services to those individuals. So, service.brand is the spot that allows you to deliver those services to those customers wherever they might be, to innovate your business models. And I've seen lots of innovative ideas that some brands have about how they're going to transition their organization based on service.brand. Let's dig in a little bit closer here on just to bring it forward. So on the channel side. So, when I thought about this and I said, okay, well, let's go look and find a broker or an agent for Progressive. I searched up and I found this gentleman, O'Berryman. He's got a decent looking site, but then I go to look at what he presents for Progressive. He has nothing on there. There's no content in there that talks about the key message of Progressive and what Progressive's trying to do. So, and that gentleman, O'Berryman, he controls his site. He does a decent job with it, but does he really represent what Progressive wants him to represent? So the content might be poor, it's an ineffective conversion site, there's no analytics, there's a management challenge to understand what these 4 or 5 or 10,000 channel operators are doing. In the new world, where we have a destination of O'Berryman.Progressive, Progressive can now distribute that content straight across their entire channel, have a consistent messaging across the entire space, control it, manage it, and understand it, and then again, as we spoke of before, take that best practices and spread that across the entire channel to lift it. I think this one's a very good one, and I see a lot of brands thinking about this strategy. The other one on marketing communications is, it becomes very obvious to me, when you think about, a company like a car manufacturer such as Toyota that spends millions of dollars in TV ads, and at the end of each ad, they present a destination URL, in this case toyota.com/Prius family. So that's not too bad, but when that commercial ends, will I remember that? And is that exactly what I want people to hear? So that's what people do today. I've sat in those meetings at large organizations where we're trying to decide, okay, what destination URL should we do? And we try to find a good .com or a good .net, and they're just not available. So invariably, we resolve to the directory structure, and we put, a directory such as this toyota.com/Prius. In the new world, it's going to be different. It's going to be just key message.brand, as we spoke of before. This is memorable. So when and you think about that target that we're trying to talk to and trying to get them to respond, what are they doing? In a TV case, they're sitting on their couch, they're watching the program, the commercial comes up, in the last 2 or 3 seconds, we see this destination URL that the marketers are trying to drive people to. I say, well, that's an interesting ad. There's something interesting about that key message. But I'm not going to go there right now, and the commercial ends and the program comes up, and then, next commercial comes up, and I think, oh, what was that Toyota one? Well, I can't remember. But if it was Prius.Toyota, I'm going to remember that. If I'm driving in my car and I hear it as well, but I can't respond, I can't make my phone call, or I can't surf the web, when I get home, I'm going to remember that's Prius.Toyota. So if you think about, the response ROIs that we're trying to get out of a promotion, and if we can lift those response ROIs just a little bit, what a difference it makes to the entire organization. So that's the positive side. So, and there are several others. What are the other drivers on this? Whether it's, customer.brand or service.brand, it depends on what the business is trying to do. So, and when you think about that, how do you actually execute that? So you're going to need technologies to be able to deploy these different use cases that control it, that look at the domain as the center point, and from there integrate third-party technologies such as CMSs, analytics, mobile, social, e-commerce, wrap that up in security to deliver these different types of use cases. So those two pieces, the defensive side and the opportunity side, have me believe, and many in the industry that I've talked to, that down the road we will see that all major and all aspiring brands will adopt a .brand registry strategy. It just seems automatic, and it will, it's an inevitability that this will happen. The guys that have gone in round one, so if you're sitting there and you have your .brand and you're ready to go, you're at the starting line and you have a major advantage. And when you think about that, how often in business do we have an opportunity to do something and innovate where competitors cannot follow? In this case, if you're a brand that has done it and applied, you have this opportunity. Competitors can't compete because they may not have applied. You might have a 2-year or a 3-year window here to do innovations and gain that leadership position on it. So I see it as a huge market advantage for brands, and the opportunity cost of inaction is actually quite large. So, where do you get started here? How do you get this going? So I sort of bring this back to practicality and start to look at, I've thought about this concept a lot of .brand IQ. So you need to build that inside your organization. We're at the starting line here. So what is .brand IQ? So, thinking about .brand IQ, think about a function. Think about a function, first of all, of what are the capabilities of a registry? What's new? What does this allow you to do that you could not do before or was not feasible to do before? And how those capabilities then can map to our greater business objectives. So what are we trying to do as a business? We're trying to drive channel. We're trying to drive more affinity and advocacy. So how can I apply those capabilities to those objectives to develop use cases? So I'm going to now define those use cases to deliver on these objectives, and I'm going to develop an execution plan. So your .brand IQ is a function of your progress across all of these variables, and that then will sort of state about what your readiness is to deploy your .brand. So I've tried to represent this in a graphic here. So if you have a quick look at this, you sort of think, the notion of IQ. So you've got an IQ curve with some sort of a distribution of where people fall on it. I've laid that on top of a adoption curve, from laggards to leaders that, we've all seen in our business schools. So when you think about that, you think about the IQ going from 0, low, up to genius level, and then inside that, then you have personas, corporate personas, of what they believe or where they are on the dot brand IQ curve. So the first one is the dismisser. They didn't apply. They didn't have knowledge. Or maybe they applied just for defensive purposes, and when no competitors applied in their space or no one tried to compete or register or apply for their string, they withdrew it. So they're in a high-risk position right now because they don't have an ability to anchor on their dot brand in the new world. The next persona are the defenders. In my view, this was the majority of brands that went forward. So they applied. They're there to defend their marks. It's largely a legal-driven enterprise, and good on legal because they made the right decision in convincing the C-suite that we need to do this. But they're really there in the defensive purposes, and their comfort that they've got this now that no one can apply on their behalf. The next step are the learners. So the learners are the organizations that are starting to look at this, and many are coming into this category right now to understand what the capabilities are, trying to do some ideation of what the use cases are. They're starting to allocate a few more resources in the human side and in the capital side to figure out, what this means for us. But they're still largely, these three are still largely reactive to what's going on. And the defender and the learner, it's okay to be there right now. In fact, I believe most are probably here who have applied. The next step are the experimenters. So these are the organizations that, they have a pretty good sense of what these capabilities are. They're ready and they want to go out and they want to test and learn and adjust, and they want to be those fast followers. They don't necessarily want to lead, but they want to be prepared to do that. And they've built now a cross-functional team, and they started to allocate more resources to be prepared for this because they see how this is going to change how they market as they go forward. And then we have the innovators. So these are the organizations that, they get it. They understand the use cases. The team's set up, and they're getting prepared, and they're going to launch stuff, and they want to innovate how they go to market. And then the third, and then the last one, obviously, are the visionaries who plan to disrupt the model, disrupt their space, and do something that's completely different. They probably have not only a cross-functional team in place, but they have organizational alignment or are building that, and they're allocating significant amount of resources to change how they do business. So that concept really says, okay, when you think about this in terms of your organization, where do you fall in here? And by the way, I think that, if you think of this curve, it's not evenly distributed as I have it represented there. It's really more like this, where most people, most brands, you think about, we have 600 entities that have applied. Most didn't even apply. So it's early in the game, but this curve is going to move to the right over time, and as the penny's going to drop, and brand marketers are going to understand what they have available to them, and we're going to see quite a few innovations as we go forward. So the question, I think, for any organization to say, who and where are you today? And where do you want to be in 3 to 6 months, in 1 to 2 years? Whether, you might say, well, I'm a defender, and, we don't want to be a visionary, but we want to be prepared. We want to be prepared to, respond to the changes in the market. So it's a great way for your organization to understand, who are you, where you want to get to, and then what that gap is, and how are we going to get there. Okay, so as a backdrop, that's sort of some of the theory and the thinking behind it. And now you've got to think about, okay, how do we get practical about this? How do we put this into place? So moving from ideation to go-to-market, I've used this methodology for years, as a product introduction path of thinking, there's a gap in an ideation, I want to get here, here's my gap, what are we going to do? You move from there to a strategy definition, there's always an adjustment cycle as you come back, as you learn new things, but from strategy you move into execution, planning, and once you get to execution, then you can move to go to market. So this is pretty traditional stuff and practice, and I'm sure there's some heads nodding out there, but this is how you're going to get to market. So when you think about the case of adopt brand, you know, what are some of the critical success factors? I think one of the key, and maybe the key, is leadership and the permission to innovate inside an organization. You have to have that, you know, that innovation culture to be able to do this, because it's not necessarily without risk. There is investment, but it is going to change how the world works. You do need to have that cross-functional agile group, right, that is empowered, that can make changes, that can recommend and help to build that internal communications alignment on the vision and strategy. Fourth, you really do need some domain expertise, domain industry expertise from, you know, there are lots of good consultants out in the space, or people that can help you understand what it means to own a domain name and some of the technologies that will be available. You know, you've probably partnered with some already. You need to leverage those people, and you're going to need systems. You're going to need an enterprise management system to be able to manage this thing as we go forward, and to scale it, and a system that can innovate and progress with you. So what do you need to operate? You know, there's sort of, you know, if you try to break this thing down and make it simple, it's always difficult. But, you know, someone needs to request a domain name. So you need to make that fairly simple to be able to people to put that into some sort of a process where you can say, okay, here's a name that people want to put this on, and here's the strategy why. And then you need an approval mechanism. And that approval mechanism needs to be able to control what goes on your registry. And then from there you need automation to provision it. And you get it out and have that name point to the right servers and point to, you know, the different content you're trying to drive out onto the market. And then you need visibility and reporting. So these are, I believe, sort of very simplified sort of view of it. But if you can get this, then it's going to help you. And what you need is something secure that's scalable. You also need to be agile and extensible. So a way to extend in and integrate third-party technologies, whether it's content management or social community building tools or whatever it might be, that you can now create experiences with your brand and on your brand ecosystem. And it needs to be purpose-built for brands. Obviously, this is something that we've been working on. So for the past year and a bit, we've been working on a platform just to do this, to make this, it's specifically designed for registries, for .brand registries. We are not in the business of trying to sell domains out to the public. What we're building is an enterprise system that gives you control, visibility, and automation. And let me back that up by just say that, you know, every brand's going to want to have control. Absolutely. But often when you gain control, you lose the ability to innovate because it slows everything down. So we tried to address this problem of, yes, you need control so that not just anything goes on your registry, but also you need to allow those people at the execution level, the marketing managers and channel managers and directors, to be able to drive programs out there and innovate. So we've thought about those sort of as core needs and said, okay, how do we make this simple? How do we make it so that it's easy for people to use? How do we do it so that, you know, people aren't making mistakes and deleting a name by mistake or changing a zone file so that suddenly the content is not propagating or the domain is not propagating out on the internet? So we've really tried to remove that complexity from closed domain management. So what's that do then? So what we're trying to do is empower that organization, you know, with simplicity, control, flexibility. That gives power to that organization. And then what that does is it allows an organization to integrate other types of technologies, deploy those programs, innovate on that registry, scale it, and respond to change that happens in the market. So those sorts of concepts are the ones that we've sort of centered on. Say, how can we build something that makes sense for organizations to go forward with? Okay. So just to wrap it up, who are going to be the winners? My view are the winners are the people that are going to start investing relatively soon in the first round. Those brands that have applied in the first round have a huge advantage over the rest because they're at the starting gate. They'll very soon be able to deploy those registries. So what I put together is a couple of, or a top 10 recommendations that I'd have for any brand that's going out there. So first one is take advantage of this position. It's a huge opportunity because your competitors, again, cannot compete with you if they have not applied for it. So that's a huge advantage. Secondly, you got to start now. You got to build that expertise inside. Build your brand IQ. Ideation to execution takes time in a large organization, and you have to gain the buy-in across the organization to do that. So, by you participating in this call, it tells me that you're already starting to try to think about this and to think about what you're going to do going forward. Again, as we mentioned, you have to have a culture of innovation. It has to come from the very top of the organization, say, yeah, this is different. This is a way for us to do something. Allow that blue sky thinking. Think differently to add value. Recognize that you've got a new palette of innovation capabilities and get that C-suite permission to innovate. Those innovative brands will win. And then as you gain that, then you need to empower a small cross-functional team. I wouldn't bring a big team in. Gain a team of leaders, people that are empowered to make decisions, and to build that in-house brand IQ. Fifth, let's engage with experts. Get some knowledge. The domain space is a small little space, and it's complicated, and there's all sorts of nuance involved with it, regulations and policy you need to comply with. But certainly project manage this internally and build that internal expertise as well over time so that you're not constantly outsourcing everything that you need to do. I don't think there's a magic bullet here. It's just going to take time for people to understand it. But you have to take ownership and build that expertise. Six, we talked about this a little bit, get the stakeholder alignment across the organization. There are different business leaders inside large organizations with different business units. Each have their own agenda and objectives that they're trying to achieve in each quarter as we go forward. So you've got to gain some alignment, and frankly, this is one of the hardest parts in any large organization is getting alignment across it. But that small empowered team, if it's the right group of people, are the people that can do that for you. I also think you should set short-term goals. Don't try to boil the ocean right in the beginning, and iterate that division. Test and learn if you're not sure. Try a few things. The easiest ones, frankly, are promotion.brand. Every marketer inside your organization will love to have one of those names as an option to help support, their large campaign that they're trying to get out the door. And set up that, and along that line, brand is additive in the beginning. You don't need to go and change your entire digital strategy, in my view. In fact, I don't think you should. I think you should allow those teams, and you've got probably dozens of people within digital and marketing and channel all aligned on a strategy today. You're not going to throw that all out the window and throw brand into the mix and say, okay, guys, figure this out. Put this on the side, but have a team that's really starting to begin to understand it. But I do believe that over time, brand is absolutely transformational, and it will start to take over time. You will reside, put your marketing and your experiences on brand, as people will come to trust that brand is you because you own it, you control it. Nobody can infringe upon that space. And set it up to scale. You're going to go out there today and say, well, we're going to do a few hundred domains on, these sorts of different things, and, we're not sure what we're going to do, so we don't need to put systems to be able to support that. That's a mistake. I've been managing domain names for 15 years, and I can tell you that, and I'm sure that many of you that are on the call have struggled with this, managing portfolios of domains is a challenge, and trying to transition those down the road into something that is difficult. So set it up properly today, because you will scale this down the road. And along these lines, it's important inside an organization to people to understand that, look, this is completely new. We can have fun with this. We can lead this market. And brands that lead attract talent, and they retain talent. And by doing that, you're going to have another competitive advantage because people love to be somewhere where people are innovating. So thank you very much. That's I hope that provides some good thinking for you as you go forward. And Matt, if you wanted to take over and see if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer any.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. That was a really excellent and very informative presentation. I'd like to invite anybody on the call to pose a question. You can either use the question box or the chat box. We did have a couple of questions come through, so Peter, if you're happy to take those on.
Sure.
The first one that we have is that you say that these are new capabilities, but is it not true that you can do much of this with your current domain name and use directory structures or subdomains? I think you covered that a little bit, but perhaps you want to elaborate a little further?
Yeah, no, a lot of people talk about that, and I guess the first thing is that there are new capabilities that just didn't exist. .brand, that's entirely new, and you can do that and brand that. Key message .brand, we talked about that. There are elements of structures today in terms of directories that, yeah, you can do it. Sure, you can do it. You can use CMS systems to create different engagement experiences on those URLs. But it's pretty complicated. It's expensive to do. It's hard to maintain. And there's a simplicity around owning a .brand and be able to put name .brand, whatever it might be, and deploy systems to be able to do that more effectively. So you could have done this before, but you might have had to invest millions of dollars to do it. My view is that technologies are going to evolve. In fact, we're building technology to be able to enable this sort of thing, that it's much easier to cascade stuff out on your own network. So I think that's really important to consider, that there are new capabilities such as control, authenticity, security in the entire space. That's absolutely new. But in some cases, it's that this just makes it feasible, and there's a better ROI by doing it. If you can deploy 5,000 on a directory, 5,000 channel entities on a directory structure, yeah, you could do that. But is it really effective, or would it be more effective if it was channel.brand? So I just believe that there's sort of two elements of, there's pure capability difference, but then there's also feasibility side and value of deploying a new strategy.
So that's great. Another question, what do you think about how the public will respond to a .brand? Will they be confused or not about which site to go to, for example, like a brand.com versus home.brand?
That is a challenge, no question. But one thing that I think that you think about the .com bubble back in 2000, and why that burst. A lot of it was, there were ideas about how technologies could be developed and employed, and all of them were valid. One of the big problems was the consumers weren't ready. Broadband didn't exist. People weren't ready for the internet. They weren't even ready to put a credit card in. When you flash forward now, almost 15 years, we're very adaptable as a public on changes on the net. You just look at some of the products that come online and take off instantly, such as Vine, or look at Facebook, or I'm sitting here with my iPhone. Didn't exist 5 years ago, and now everybody's got one. I think we underestimate the ability of the public to be adaptable. And once one or two of these major brands start promoting, whether it's run.Nike or drive.BMW, people are going to look at that and they're going to get it. They're going to understand it. So I think some of the other conventions on other TLDs could get quite confusing. But the beautiful thing about a .brand is this is the brand. It's authoritative. It's authentic. I think people will get it. I think they'll get it very quickly.
That's interesting. That follows. That segues nicely into the next question, which is: so, are you advocating then that the people on this call should be thinking about migrating away from their .com?
Eventually, maybe, and I say maybe, but not today. I wouldn't do it today. When I was with A Plus and Deluxe, one of the things that we did is we transitioned A Plus over to Deluxe. That's a very difficult exercise. You can do it; it's possible, but I think it's pretty risky, and I wouldn't do that at the get-go. I wouldn't think about doing that. I'd have the DOT brand running side by side, and then over time, there's going to be a point where you're going to be able to transition over if it makes sense. And if you look at, I'm sure all brands work with good SEO companies that can tell them, the value and the score of their .com versus the .brand ecosystem they're starting to build. But if a brand creates an ecosystem where there's good interaction, whether it's customer or channel or whatever that use case might be, and they build authoritative content on their .brand, well, that's going to rank higher. That's necessarily going to rank higher, but it's not right away. So you're going to have to build that up as an ecosystem, and at some point in the future, there will be a business case to say, okay, now we anchor everything on .brand. The .com either goes away or becomes a forward. There are ways to execute that, and lots of companies out there that can help support that, but I am not an advocate of switching from a .com right now that you have a run rate of business that's being driven through that, and it's a well-known entity in the space, over to a .brand. You need to invest some time and effort to create the entity or the ecosystem that is .brand.
That's interesting. And, we had kind of similar question from a couple of people, which is, if you were going to advise brands on like the one or two things they should be thinking about or practically kind of implementing like right now, what would you say to them? What would be your advice?
Well, I guess right now, make it a priority in the organization. I don't think it is in most organizations yet. There are a few that are starting to really think about and see that it's an innovation opportunity, and set up that dedicated group with an innovation mandate. Educate the team, establish goals and a vision and a plan about, what this means. It's going to take a little bit of time. Get your organization into a readiness position, and a lot of that's around, communication inside the organization, and allowing people inside the organization to come up with good ideas about, how this can innovate. So, it's education, so I guess summary, priority, educate, and put yourself in a readiness position. And it's important to understand what these opportunity costs are. There's a tremendous market advantage for the organizations that have these things. So, 1, priority, 2, educate, and 3, readiness.
That's great. So those are all the questions we have. Do you want to kind of let everybody know how they can get hold of the slide deck for this presentation?
Yeah, sure. I've got my my information up now on there. You can just send me an email or give me a call. Love to chat with anyone who's interested to discuss this more, whether it's just ideation or gain a few thoughts or talk to you in more depth. Thanks a lot, Matt, and thank you everyone for joining today. I know it's hard and busy schedules.
Absolutely. I want to thank you again for taking the time, and obviously to everybody else who participated, asked some great questions, as well as took the time out of their day to attend this session. Thanks very much, Peter, and thank you very much, everybody. And this concludes the webinar. I'll speak to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.